Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollack, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and technology expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades fire and the rebuilding effort. I'm journalist Joel Pollack here with technology expert Ron Goldschmidt and entrepreneur Oren Ezra. And we are joined this evening by Joy Chen, who is a very important person out there in Altadena. And she is doing some incredible work organizing her neighbors to fight some of the obstruction of the insurance companies, one company in particular. We'll get to that. But first of all, hello, Joy. Thanks so much for joining us from the Eaton fire. This is kind of a union or unity episode, I guess you could say, between Palisades fire and Eaton fire survivors.
Yes, well, I'm so happy to be with you. Great.
Yeah. We'll introduce you.
Survivors.
You know, I've been saying for a long time we should get the people together between the Palisades and Eaton fire. I went out there a few times and visited the area, and it was very interesting. There are some important differences, I think, but we'll get into all that. I just wanted to kick off a little round of news. The only news item I have at the moment is an interesting take, I think, on how to fight these fires, and we need to think about international examples. But there was a wildfire that broke out in central Israel this week, and I followed the Israeli firefighters here when they were visiting and learned a lot from them about how they fight wildfires in Israel. They don't have anything like the kind of equipment that we have or the resources that we have, and yet they somehow seem more effective. This fire in Israel burned about 5,000 acres, so it was about, I guess, a third more or less of the size of the Eden fire and about a fifth of the size of the Palisades fire, just in terms of geographic extent. But not one structure was burned, not one. And I was talking to people in Israel asking how they were doing, and they said, well, they're keeping the fire in the valleys, and they're not letting it get up the hills. The wind was about 60 to 80 miles an hour at one point, so comparable to the Palisades and Eaton fires, although they had aircraft up in the air. I think there were a few hours they couldn't fly, but basically it was very similar. They had some military aircraft they told me that they had modified to deal with the high winds, just modified on the spot to deal with the high winds. So they had that. They got the military mobilized right away. And they dropped a lot of fire retardant around the communities that were threatened, but not one structure was burned. So I think we need to figure out what they're doing, because many of us believe that these fires could have been mitigated if they had been handled properly. There might have been some damage on the periphery of the community, but we didn't need to see the entire town burned down. That's my opinion. But anyway, that's my news. And Ron, I know you've got some updates as well.
Yeah, just not so much news. We have we got one listener email after our last episode when we talked about financing for lots and whether it's available. Well, it turns out, financing for lots is not really available from major banks. But there are some non-hard money options for land or construction loans. And we heard from mortgage expert Danny Gipsman, who mentioned that there's attractive bank financing available for owner users, not just investors. So this is a very important distinction. If there are folks who are owners that want to use they want to get a mortgage for as a primary on their house, there are some lot loans available up to 80% LTV, reasonable rates, as well as construction loans. So if you are interested in that, you can just email me. I'll be glad to pass along Danny's information. So that's really good news, actually, for local folks. Although Danny does mention that he has not done any local loans yet with the local community, but these options are available. The other thing I wanted to mention...
Hold on a second, just 1 second, Ron. Do you want to give them the email of the show to send that to?
Yeah, just email the show and I'll pass along the info.
It's pod@threehomelessguys.com.
That's right. Subscribe and subscribe to us on all channels. And the second is more of a gripe rather than news. But I've been getting a lot of feedback on the closures on PCH. Along with that, there's a lot of gripes about the amount of ticketing that's going on PCH. Everybody knows that and the Palisades, by the way, that the speed limit is now 25 miles per hour, which is, by the way, impossible to drive. I don't know if I don't know we're not in 1920. You can't drive 25 miles an hour across PCH. It's not keeping any crime down. It's not keeping looters down. As much as I love our local police and fire forces, I have to say this is not helping, the residents. And I've been hearing a lot of people getting speeding tickets. And, the police is being very vigilant about rolling stops and pretty minor things that I think honestly are just not helping the quality of life here. So I'm just going to mention that it already takes an hour and a half to come across PCH if you live on the western side of Malibu. I don't think these restrictions are helping, alleviate some of the suffering. It just feels like there could be a better concentration of force somewhere else where there's actually problems.
I was pulled over for a rolling stop on Sunset.
Except for Joel. Joel is a bad guy. And, I think you should be behind bars.
But I actually had an interesting story. I didn't get a ticket because this is, a little personal maybe, but I couldn't actually see very well. I actually thanked the officer for pulling me over because I was crying. I'd come out of my neighborhood, and there was this couple that I had shown their house to in the early days of the fire before anybody could get in, and they had walked from Santa Monica to the Palisades, and I gave them a lift up the hill to their house. And on the side of their house, on the wall, I think they had cleared their lot, but the walls, you know how sometimes the staircases and the other parts of the driveway are still there, and they had spray painted on their wall, "Fight on," with an exclamation point. And I saw that as I was leaving my neighborhood one day. This is like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I just started crying. So I knew the traffic light was there, but I just kind of rolled through it. I didn't really stop because my vision was all blurry. The officer pulled me over, and I said, "You know what? You probably should have pulled me over because I can't see." And we just
the oldest trick in the book, Joe, the crying to the officer.
I said, "I promise I'm not crying."
Yeah, damsel in distress. I get it.
I told him, "I promise you, I'm not crying to get out of a ticket." We talked for like half an hour, and then he said, "All right, just don't do that again." So anyway, that's my sad story.
So I'm driving a lot on PCH as well, and most annoying thing for me is that what I do, I just put the 25 miles per hour on the autopilot, and every time I have a police behind me, as soon as they can, they just go and go ahead, and they drive 50 miles an hour at least. So you know what? You give tickets, at least drive 25 miles an hour as well.
Yeah.
That's the minimum we can ask. Again, I don't understand why would somebody that is driving 35 miles an hour would get a ticket, and why there is on the stretch from Malibu to Sunset, from the stop at Malibu to Sunset, I saw probably, 3 different policemen with a laser on the cars, which I don't understand why. It's either homeowners or contractors, I haven't seen anybody driving there like crazy. It's not like it used to be back then, before the fires. Kids used to drive over there 100 miles an hour. I would see a police once in a blue moon. I would see a police. And now that everybody's driving 25, you put 3 policemen all the time over there. Yeah. So I don't know, guys.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
All right. Well,
and another thing, by the way, that I wanted to mention, I just heard today that whoever is not clearing his lot are going to get cited. So I think that by June, they said, beginning of June, they're going to start giving tickets to people that didn't clear their lot, which I have mixed feeling about it. On one hand, yes, we need all the lots to be cleared You cannot leave it like this. On the other hand, you're making it like so hard. It's hard to find somebody good that will do it because you put so much red tapes. And I can understand people that saying, "Hey, I want to wait because I want to find like a better deal, a better time to do that." But just like I heard it today, and I have mixed feeling about it.
Mm.
All right, Joy. Well, that's the perspective from the Palisades, but let's bring Joy Chen in here. She is a longtime resident of Altadena, and we were able to speak earlier this week, and her story is quite remarkable. But Joy, I want to let you tell your story because, first of all, the story of how you became involved in helping lead your community, the evacuation of your community, is amazing. And then the story of how you are organizing homeowners and insurance policyholders to fight back against what's happening to many of us is also remarkable. So, Joy, please tell us about yourself and your experience of the Eaton fire.
Well, I don't know if it's remarkable. I think it's just all very human. And well, first of all, thank you all so much for having me. I've always wanted to see how we can connect to help us all recover faster and stronger. So this is my very first interaction with Palisade Survivor, and I hope that it won't be the last. Well, our story started out very unremarkably. For the last 2 years, I was the admin of the pickleball WhatsApp at the Altadena Country Club. And so this was a very unremarkable little WhatsApp. We mostly share pickleball memes, arrange games, but, we all kind of got to be quite friendly through pickleball at the country club. And the afternoon of the fire, which was Tuesday for us, Tuesday late afternoon is when it started on July 7th. And somebody in the pickleball WhatsApp said, there's a fire on the hill. So everyone went out of their houses, looked at the fire. And at that time, when we turned on the news, all the news was about the Palisades fire. There was nothing on the news about our fire. And so quickly we started tracking the fire using the WhatsApp. If you may have heard that the official evacuation orders in Altadena came much too late. They came 12 hours, 18 hours too late. And so 18 people died in Altadena. But nobody in our WhatsApp died because the WhatsApp was, we're all calling each other, tracking the fire, saying, get Gene out of his house, get the so-and-so out. And so we were figuring out where the fire was because of our WhatsApp. By the next day, the country club had burned down. There was no more pickleball. Half our houses were gone. And the fire was continuing to burn. And so we used the WhatsApp to start trading information about, progress, recovery. And so people started saying, well, can I bring my neighbors on? We said, well, yeah, of course. There's the original purpose of this is gone. And so the group kept on growing and growing. It just became our source for sharing information and resources about recovery, where the Red Cross was. And it just continued to grow. We ended up outgrowing WhatsApp. And the biggest problem with the WhatsApp for us is that, we wanted to grow because we had this idea that we didn't want to leave nobody should face this trauma alone. So we wanted people to invite their friends. But the problem with WhatsApp is it's built for privacy. So new members cannot see past chats, right? So every time a new member came, we'd be happy that we're growing, but they'd be like, hi, I'm here. What did I miss? And everyone would be like, oh, God. And it was so hard to, onboard anybody. So ultimately, we ended up moving to Discord, and we kept on growing. In Discord, we can grow infinitely. We can have millions on Discord. And then once we were on Discord, we set up, we now have 40 moderated channels. It is now the Eaton Fire Survivors Network. And one of the things that we did early on was we set up a different channel for each insurance carrier. And that was incredible because we started seeing that whether people were recovering or not, whether people were recovering or their trauma was only growing, depended hugely on which insurance carrier they had. I mean, it was just so stark. I mean, every day we're in the Discord, we're seeing people with USAA, maybe some other insurance carriers, like steadily moving back. My family just moved back into our house last weekend because we're with USAA. But then other families are sinking into greater and greater despair, financial desperation, when they're with other carriers. And State Farm seemed to be just worst of the worst. So we're watching all this happen. In the meantime, we're reading the news that State Farm is coming in for another rate hike. At first 39% rate hike, the sixth rate hike in 6 years. And it just didn't seem right to us that on one hand, State Farm is not fulfilling its obligations to longtime policyholders. And on the other hand, they're basically minimizing their costs artificially, illegally. And meantime, they're asking for a rate hike, and our government appeared poised to have this rate hike. So I've been hosting a Zoom every Thursday for our entire community with people, outside experts, to help us recover. And so I had in Deputy Commissioner Tony Signorelli of the DOI, and I asked him, why would you be approving a rate hike, a pay raise, for this company that is clearly not fulfilling its obligations to current policyholders? And his response was, well, I only oversee the claims management. I don't oversee the rate hikes. So he's basically saying this is because it's like two different departments within DOI. And, I'm a former deputy mayor of Los Angeles, so I have a lot of empathy for how difficult it can be to regulate companies and how difficult it is to get things done sometimes in a big bureaucracy. But that just seemed like the worst explanation. Like, our basic function of the DOI is to protect consumers. And we can't execute it because the right hand is disconnected from the left hand. And that just didn't seem right. And so we started a letter campaign to Lara, asking him basically to defer the rate hike until he's investigated State Farm claims. We put it on our website at efsurvivors.net. We put on this form. You can put in your name and email. And then we just put in a message like, do you have a State Farm experience that you'd like to share? We were not prepared to get hundreds of State Farm experiences of delays and denials and underpayments. I mean, they were just like flowing into my emails. And I was thinking, I cannot be the only person to see this. And so I had to figure out how to use Squarespace, started posting these hundreds of messages on. And then we had a press conference. We had 8 survivors of State Farm all go on the record. And the press conference was it was an incredible press conference we had. I just got the report today. We had 2.7 million, I don't know what this really means, but of media coverage, $1 million worth of media coverage. We had 36 million people, audiences reached across TV and radio and digital. Because I think that, and I'm going to stop right here, I think that this idea that we can be paying years and decades of insurance premiums just in case that day comes, that disaster strikes. And then disaster strikes and we don't get to access our insurance benefits. I think that story, there's something that's very emotional and visceral. And Joel, you and I, when we talked the other day, I think that there's something that's very emotional about that. And that's why there's been so much interest in this story. Since then, the last couple of days, Sasha Perez, who's our state senator, and Ben Allen, who's your state senator, both signed a letter calling on Lara to defer the rate hike until these hundreds of survivor accounts have been investigated. And then just today, I was surprised that Public Citizen collected 4,000 signatures to support our campaign. They hadn't even reached out to tell me they were doing this. So I think that there's clearly growing support for this idea that, this rate hike should be deferred just a few months. We have hundreds of firsthand accounts of State Farm illegal delays and denials and underpayments, and just investigate them before you do the rate hike. So that's what we're up to here in Altadena. We'd love to join forces with you guys.
Seems Joy, that the rate hikes is just a symptom of something that State Farm is actively doing. And we have WhatsApp channels as well for all the different insurance company. I've joined all of them just to see what the discussion is about here as well. Like, State Farm is by far, in a way, the worst offenders. There's just so many different horror stories, which I think like amount to basically pattern, like, I don't know what you want to call it, bad faith, aside from the unjustifiable rate hikes, you have delays in claim processing, stalling techniques, underpayment of claims, terrible customer service overall, lack of accountability, like just basically, they expect from us very, and I'm with State Farm, Oren is with State Farm as well, as is Joel. And they expect from you very unreasonable things when you expect from them some bare minimums. And I'll just give you an example, and I actually been lucky. Our initial adjuster has been actually pretty good. We were just recently turned to another adjuster, so we have to restart the whole process with them again, which is a very common tactic of theirs, to switch multiple adjusters and basically restart the process each time. But one of the things that we're working through right now is like, they came back with just outrageously, ridiculously low quotes for rebuilding, which even our adjuster was like laughing and saying like, obviously we know this is wrong, but like, we're just going to go do this anyways. It's not, I can't do anything. And I totally understand him, but he's like, it comes from up top, but basically like just outrageous rebuilding costs, to which we have to counter with our own bids, but which have to be extremely detailed to a level which nobody wants to write. Like if you're in business and you want to write an estimate for somebody, I can get a contractor to give me a detailed estimate. I can't get a contractor to free of charge give me 100-page detailed contract line by line item of what State Farm expects as far as like a counter bid, which I'm not even sure what they're going to do with it. So it's just like this death by a thousand cuts.
Yes.
With State Farm at every level. I just asked my adjuster, I asked other people that are within the State Farm community, like, is this resonating at all to the top of State Farm? Is anything getting through? Do they even care? And like, I honestly, at this point, from my point of view, I haven't seen that they don't really care. Have you seen anything different?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we found that the chairman of the board of State Farm, the new chairman of the board, is a non-executive chairman, he was just appointed in January 1st, and he is the chief customer officer of Nordstrom. So, I mean, that's just really interesting that you have somebody in a company that is well known for their customer service behaving like this. We have now talked to disaster support groups from around the country, and we've heard that this is systemic at State Farm. They're the largest player in California. They're the largest player in the country. So this is actually something that affects everybody who has insurance, because when the major player is bullying its policyholders like this, artificially lowering their claims payouts, that's got to distort the entire market, right? And weaken protections for everyone. I learned in the last couple of weeks exactly how this underpayment phenomenon is happening, Ron, that you're seeing these ridiculously low estimates, because, in our channel on State Farm, you see these same things that you're talking about over again, the constant rotation of inexperienced adjusters and the ridiculously low loss estimates. So, people in our Discord, they're always calling their adjusters bad names. Like, what an idiot. It's a 5-bedroom house, but they write down there's 3 bedrooms. Or my roof is in smithereens, it's in dust, and they're calling it a repair job, like a $5,000 repair job. Like, what an idiot. And, I've just been like scratching my head for the last few weeks, like, what are the odds that 100% of State Farm adjusters are idiots? What really is happening here? And then one of our Discord members contacted me last weekend, and she said, Joy, I'm in the Discord because I'm a total loss survivor, but I am an independent adjuster. So she works for all the insurance companies, but she says she refuses to work for State Farm. So she's a person who goes around and does the loss estimates in Palisades, in the Eaton Fire. And what she says, what happens is we write accurate loss estimates. The loss estimates go back to State Farm, and then they change them at the office. So They alter the loss estimates before they come to you, Ron. So it's not that, and so I said, that's funny because, people are always calling the adjusters bad names. She's like, no, we're not idiots. We present accurate loss estimates. They become inaccurate at State Farm. And so she asked me to watch this 60 Minutes investigation in Florida, which I looked it up, and I encourage everybody to look it up. It's on YouTube. It's 13 minutes long, and it shows the mechanics of exactly how this happens. The insurer profiled there was not State Farm. It's a small insurance company, but she says that exact practice is how State Farm is lowering these loss estimates for the Eaton and Palisades fires. So I thought that was really interesting, and I've since continued to dig into this. And in talking to advocates, they're saying that this always has been State Farm's MO for the downward revision of loss estimates. You can call it fraud. In Florida, it was called fraud, and there was a huge outcry following that 60 Minutes investigation, so that last fall, new legislation is passed to specifically say a couple of things, Insurer Accountability Act, and it was specifically saying that, number one, policyholders have the right to every loss estimate that's written on their property. The original one, any altered ones, that's your right to see. You've been paying your premiums all these years. If they're going to come and evaluate your house, you get to see all versions of it. And number two, insurers have to provide clear explanations for any downward revisions of loss estimates. That's very reasonable legislation that, we can certainly push for here and ask for emergency. I need to understand, can we ask for emergency legislation to have this back then? But in the meantime, together, we can certainly ask Laura to do his job of providing oversight of this industry and ask him to investigate. In fact, our letter asked him to investigate all Eaton and Palisades fire claims. So we've never even made contact, but we did already include you guys. And then we can specifically ask, as part of this investigation, for State Farm to produce every version of every loss estimate that's been done on our homes. I mean, I don't think there'll be, most likely they won't be forthcoming, but at least we can put that pressure on. We demand to see every loss estimate because, Ron, what you're talking about is ridiculously low. I'm guessing from all the patterns that I'm hearing about, that ridiculously low one that you're seeing wasn't the only one that was done on your house.
That makes sense, actually, Joy, because I remember speaking to the adjuster that actually went on the site with me, and he was actually a very nice guy. I think he worked for a third party for State Farm.
Yes.
And he goes, okay, and he was like completely on board. He's like, you have a brand new house, pretty much. It's bigger than all the houses in the neighborhood, pretty much. You have like super high end finishes. Like he wrote everything down. And when I called him for basically like feedback on like where the estimate is going, whether it gives Ron, he told me like, Ron, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I think you're going to come in like well above your limit, and relative to your neighbors, like I could see what you have. Then we kind of went to a black hole. I couldn't get the estimate for a while, and then when I got it, my adjuster was off the case, and I got an estimate that was lower than all my neighbors. And so I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like there's something going on here.
Do you
and now
have that first guy's contact information? Because I'm really looking for, we really need to document this.
Yeah.
If you can get that original one, that would be amazing.
Absolutely, I do.
Because I've talked to several reporters about this, and they're like, we need documents.
Yeah, and I don't think that he, again, I don't think he was the culprit. Like he was like totally on board. He was like, he told me straight up, I don't think you're going to have anything to worry about because it's very clear like what's going on here. And then, he's off the case. They come back with like a super low estimate and like, here's 200 pages of like nonsense that I'm not a contractor. I don't want to read line by line. I'm certainly not going to argue against myself. And then you're in this black hole with two new adjusters that didn't even have any of the genesis of the whole case. So I think there's something definitely like murky going on. But what I'm hearing from what you're saying is like, despite all of this pressure, despite the 60-minute stories, despite all the articles, I think this is like not a feature. This is not a bug. This is like a feature of their system, which is how they basically resolve claims. It's just to grind you out,
Yes.
try to hold on to the money as much as possible, and hope that people give up. That's what I'm getting. If at this level of pressure, and you guys are putting tremendous pressure on, there's been national stories about this. Everybody knows that everybody knows that State Farm is the worst offender in both the Eden Fire and the Palisades Fire at this point. What do you make of this? That there's absolutely there seems to be no culpability on their end, on any level.
Well, I think that this is, I've talked to disaster groups from other fires and they've seen the Discord. They're like, oh my God, it is unbelievable how much you know because of technology. So when you say there's been so much national pressure, well, it's only been going on for like a week. And this is a company that's been doing this for decades. So in my mind, the pressure campaign we are just getting started. If anyone from State Farm is watching this, rest assured, we are just getting started. But it is starting to build, right? And I think that for decades, Ron, it's always been just big State Farm grinding individual policyholders. There's such a massive imbalance of power and information. And it's only because you have your WhatsApp channels, we have our Discord, that we're getting better information, and B, we have this power of this community. I've talked to so many of our State Farm members who are just like, I don't know what I would be doing if I didn't know. I didn't know that I'm not the only one. Everyone's just like, is this normal? No one's ever been through a large loss before, and State Farm, I think, it's a good neighbor, whatever this guy, Jake from State Farm, this great looking, actor who's always
Jake from State Farm,
partying at Coachella, seems like such a nice guy, right? Yeah. So I think that it's only now, and because of technology, like you and I are together talking because of technology, right? So we're just now figuring all this out. And now we can start to make things better for our State Farm survivors. All those people who are at our press conference that I presented a week ago, they're now suddenly getting their claims. They suddenly got, during the press conference, they were getting calls from State Farm with new, good adjusters, and they're now getting paid out. So this is just getting started, but we're not here just to help those 8 people. We're here to help everybody in State Farm and to start, reforming this industry for future disasters. But State Farm, these are bad guys. You're absolutely right. This is a feature, and this is an organization that has been behaving like this for a long time, and it's a major drag on the entire insurance market.
You mentioned Jake from State Farm. Sorry, Joel. I've just been watching the NBA playoffs the last couple of weeks a lot, and they have so many celebrity endorsers like Patrick Mahomes, Caitlin Clark, a bunch of NBA stars, really? Drake, Paul Rudd.
Wow.
They're running a new campaign as of the last couple of weeks, which is Batman and Jason Bateman is to the rescue of the insured. And I'm thinking could this be a worse product market gaslighting that they're doing right now for anybody that actually has their policies? It's they're to the rescue. It's they're operating completely on the other end of the spectrum. They're and I'm thinking all this money that went to celebrity endorsements and Batman rights and all this stuff, they should really be focusing on really just paying out their policies.
Right, but they're not.
But they're not. It's just marketing.
So this is their business. This is their business strategy, right? They spend a massive amount of money on advertising so that you are so enveloped by this good neighbor promises, but they don't fulfill their promises. This is their business model.
I'll tell you some interesting things that might make the picture a little bit more complex and maybe more interesting. My wife and I have been with State Farm for more than 15 years for every insurance product that they have, with the exception of life insurance. I think we have that elsewhere. But one of the reasons we stuck with State Farm, we were in a couple of fender benders. I don't remember whose fault it was, but anyway, I was at the body shop in Santa Monica that I used to take my car to, and the woman who owns it says to me, "Why don't you guys switch to USAA? Your wife's in the Navy Reserve, and you could get into USAA, and it's about a third of the price, and you should just switch insurers." And the reason I didn't do that was because we had outstanding customer service from State Farm until that point. Now, we hadn't had home claims at that point, but whenever I had been in 2 car accidents, neither of which was my fault. I was hit by a taxi head on. Luckily, nobody got hurt. And then I got rear-ended on the 101 a couple of years ago. But every time my car was totaled, they gave me a very generous payout for the car that immediately got me into a new car. And our insurance agent was so good that this is sort of unusual. I think I mentioned it in one of the earlier shows, but while my neighbors unfortunately were getting kicked off of their insurance by State Farm and getting pushed onto the California Fair Plan, my wife, who's a very brilliant economist, decided that we didn't have enough coverage, so she went back and bought more at the urging of our State Farm agent who was retiring. Our retiring agent said, "You guys need more fire coverage." And my wife looked at it and said, "You're right." And she actually bought more fire coverage. So on paper, we have this excellent policy. But in practice, when I read about what Joy was doing and the protest that you had a couple weeks ago, and I read the stories of your neighbors, it was like my own story. They are not paying out, and it's only once you raise a little bit of public attention that they start to help you a little bit. And we explained this in a previous episode, but basically my contents losses are probably somewhere in the area of $700,000, something like that. And they offered me not 500,000. They offered me $5,000 for the house contents.
Yeah.
And it was so crazy that you're right. The media want documents. So there was a journalist from CBS News who heard our story and said, "Do you have the documents?" I gave her the documents, and she put them on television. And after that happened, we got a new adjuster from State Farm who apologized. He said, "I'm so sorry that our company did this to you," and et cetera.
Yeah.
And we thought we were onto a new, maybe better path with State Farm, and then he got replaced. So we had another adjuster. So, this is going on. And my wife, the economist, had a couple of theories. And if it indeed is a feature and not a bug, why do they do it? And I think it's because, this is my wife's idea really, but one reason is that they want to spread the losses out over several quarters. So if they pay out right away, they take a massive loss all at once. So what they do is they stretch it out and they try to hide the loss with profits from other parts of their business so it doesn't look like a loss. The other thing is, and this is my wife's insight, but also resonates with my experience as an attorney, it's a negotiating tactic. And what they're doing is they're finding out who's desperate for cash. They probably have algorithms that say which of our policyholders have big mortgages, large families, big living expenses, maybe low credit ratings because they have revolving debt and student loan debt or whatever. Who needs the cash? And I think they're lowballing these offers, but offering cash right away to get people to take the cash and deal with their immediate expenses, which are a huge urgent priority and emergency for many people, and walk away from the rest. And so they're trying to segment the market among their policyholders this way. I think that's unethical, but that's what they're doing. It seems to me that's what they're doing.
It's not just unethical, it's illegal because they're not fulfilling their contractual obligations, right? So it's not just that it's wrong. They're not, what they're doing is they're not fulfilling their obligations. And I think that, I don't really know, I don't know that, I haven't, talked to many Palisades State Farm survivors, but here in Altadena, Altadena is not a wealthy place. It's more middle class, working class, and the stories are just so heartbreaking. At our press conference, I don't know if you've seen our press conference, it's on our website at efsurvivors.net if anyone's interested. We have Sarissa Henderson is 4th generation Altadena, and she's African American. She is a renter. She was living in our house for 25 years. Her grandmother started renting it, and now her grandmother died. It's her and her sister. And she has a $16,000 renter's policy that State Farm's stiffing her for. State Farm, she's basically very,
It's
very
unreal.
housing insecure, you know? And I'm just telling you, I'm not telling you anything that, you know, this is stuff that she talked about at her press conference publicly. So she just got her January rent check, you know, but she's been covering and she doesn't know when the next rent check is coming. And so you can't really, you know, she can't secure new housing. So it's just like, this stuff is just cruel, you know? And it's like, and what are they fighting her? A total loss survivor. She lost everything, all of her belongings, you know? And it's just like story after story like this. So when you say that they're, you know, they're exhausting, they're not just exhausting. I mean, poor Sarissa, you know, she's got lupus and she keeps on having flare-ups. And she has to go to the hospital because it's like a full-time job trying to deal with State Farm, in addition to just trying to survive.
100%.
You know, she's maxed out her credit cards, lost her retirement savings. But it's like all of these things, right? So, I mean, families in Altadena, they don't have $1 million or $2 million lying around. You know, it might take $2 million to rebuild. They don't have that kind of cash lying around.
By the way, Joy, I don't know why people think that everybody that is from Palisade or Malibu has $1 million or $2 million. I don't have $1 million or $2 million sitting. All of us, I think a lot of people think that like people in Palisade just like sit on like tons of money. We don't. I promise you. There are some people, yes, but I can tell you that probably, I don't know, 70% of the people are exactly in the same situation. I'm exactly in the same situation, you know. It's not that we have money laying down, and what happened to us with the State Farm is exactly the same. We got some money in the beginning. We have big policies because it's like houses that will be very expensive to build. We don't get the money. The money is going to my mortgage company, but I still didn't get enough money to build my house. Now, I don't know, like if I'm going to build I don't know, like 2,000. My house was like 2,000 square foot. It's not huge, but I don't know if I even have the money to build it, because right now they're quoting me for like 700 friends, like best friends. I grew up with them, quoting me. Oh, it's probably going to be like $700 a square foot to build this house. My policy is not covering for it. Not only my policy is not covering for it, I'm getting probably like, I don't know, until now I got probably like 50 or 60% of my policy. So I honestly think that like if in previous fires people went ahead and started suing the power department, the DWP, maybe we should all like organize and like in the next like 2 to 3 weeks start getting like a massive lawsuit against I don't know if just against like State Farm, but maybe other insurance companies. And
well,
by the
right
way,
now,
against the commissioner, again, I don't know
the
against
commissioner.
who we can.
You know,
Because
the commissioner's job, the entire job, if you look on the DOI website, it is to protect California families.
he's busy.
It's
He's
not to
traveling.
protect
He
the
would
profits
love
or
to do
to
it, but he's
goose the
traveling.
profits or to juice the profits of State Farm. You know, they just had 3 days of public rate. They had 3 days of rate hearings in early April, and with no public comment, did not allow any public comment. And that's why we had a press conference to like provide the public comment that was not allowed there. And all they're doing is all these, you know, actuarial analyses of, you know, oh, disasters are rising, our risk is rising, et cetera, et cetera. But all of those actuarial analyses are theoretical, right? They assume that State Farm will actually pay to cover the policy, you know, the policy obligations in the event of those fires. But they're not fulfilling their policy their contractual obligations. So they're getting all these massive rate hikes and they're artificially lowering their costs. And so we're just calling on, you know, there can be lawsuits in the future. This is called bad faith when they're systemically, you know, on purpose doing these things like the loss, you know, the altering of loss estimates. But right now, in the next week, Laura has a decision to make on whether he is going to provide oversight, investigate the hundreds of credible claims that we have, which don't even include you guys, Palisades, right? Is he going to investigate State Farm's actions before approving this rate hike or not? We're all watching. So we can talk about suing State Farm later, but right now the very immediate thing is whether Laura is going to do his job. And
I don't know if we have
investigate.
confidence in it. I've heard so many things about him, but what I do know is that when State Farm had to come to a hearing to defend the rate hike they wanted, it was at the time, I think, 22%.
Yeah,
He wasn't there.
yeah.
And
He knows it.
they had a reporter from the local Sacramento, I think it was the NBC affiliate, asking his staff why he wasn't there. And they said, well, he's not legally obligated to be here. And I mean, I don't know what the story is there, because he ran for this position, he won twice, and yet he's missed a lot of hearings because he's been in Bermuda with
Yeah.
insurance executives, he's been in other places. He can't run for re-election, maybe he doesn't care. I don't know what the story is. Then
I
I've talked
hear
to
from my Democratic friends that he wants to run for LA County Supervisor. I mean, there was just a bunch of reporting by ABC News, a bunch of reporting in the Bay Area about how he set up this lieutenant governor campaign. And if you just look up ABC News, lavish spending, Laura, it details how he spent $40,000 on T&E mostly with insurance executives. And that basically I'm hearing that he wants to run for LA County Supervisor. I don't know for which seat. In any case, what we need from him to do is to, not just party with his buddies, but to actually provide oversight over this industry. And I think that, Oren, what you had just said about about these gaps in financing that everybody has, and is that when we think about recovery and rebuilding in both the Palisades and the Eden Fire areas, we're always talking about things like permitting or green building or things like that. But there's a very fundamental issue that if we don't get the insurance payouts that we're legally owed, there will be no recovery or rebuilding. We did some very, very simple analysis that State Farm owes hundreds of millions of dollars, actually $200 million, with very conservative estimates, to Altadena families. And those families, they're sinking every day into financial desperation. They're not recovering, and they're certainly not rebuilding. So this is a fundamental issue. I was just talking to some funders, philanthropists, like philanthropy organizations, and this morning, and this woman was telling me that she saw this FEMA diagram saying, for rebuilding costs, this will come from FEMA, this will come from insurance, and this will come from philanthropy. And I said, all right, well, what would that diagram look like if insurance isn't actually paying out? None of that works. Mm-hmm. These communities can be stuck for 3 years. That's what that 60 Minutes episode showed.
I'll tell you what will happen. What will happen is what everybody is talking about quietly, and basically that. And in the beginning I heard these stories, and come on, this is like stories. This is bullshit. But now it's making more and more sense. People will lose their lots. There will be like a big corporation with a lot of money. Last week we had, or beginning of the week, we had somebody over here that said that she knows a couple of these big investors that's sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars that want to buy these lots. And that's what will happen. They just think about it. They cleared one of the best areas in the world. And now without paying, and again, I don't know how everything plays out in the big picture. I don't know if it is playing out over there. I'm just thinking about it. Okay, the insurance is not paying us. The city and the county is giving us so many red tapes on everything we need to do in order to rebuild. And there is some conspiracy theory that maybe somebody is really trying to clear this lot, get us out of there, and build high rises over there or whatever it is, or let's call it. I think it's called LA Smart City 2028 conspiracy or something like this. So in the beginning I was joking about it, but more and more and I just went through the debris removal. I didn't even remove the debris yet. I just went through this process and I'm like, okay, this is hell. So now I need to deal with the insurance. After that, I need to deal with the permitting and building, which is going to be impossible to build I
Yeah.
don't know how we're going to build like with like so many trucks coming in and coming out, and prices are going like like crazy.
Yeah.
So maybe there is no maybe the conspiracy theory, there is something behind it, maybe not, but it's making me think more and more like what's going on here.
One
Well, there
thing for
might.
sure, one thing for
Yeah, Ron.
sure is like, to go back to your original point, Joy. You mentioned a few $100 million as losses to Altadena. I actually think that number is probably much higher.
Yeah.
I think State Farm specifically is on the record saying like they're going to lose $7.5 billion as a result of this disaster, and I think they've paid out only a third so far. So going back to your point, Joel, like and your wife's theories, I think like she's bang on. Like insurance companies are some of the most sophisticated companies out there. Everything is algorithmed. The reason they canceled these insurance policies like a couple months before is because they knew everything. They have actuarial, data. They have, super sophisticated software. The entire business has been McKinsey to the hour. Okay, so there's a reason why they're doing all of this. It's not happenstance. It's not incompetent person here. One lazy adjuster there, one great adjuster here. This is all a pattern. Okay, and I would encourage anybody that's listening to this and like I do think the only force here is like for us to gather forces and for there to be a legal kind of like effort mounted, whether it's on the bad faith front, whether it's on the just general fraud. I think claims that there are with some of the the estimates going on. I'm sure all of this is happening behind the scenes. I have no doubt about it. And so I think, given where we are, let's use that to our advantage. We have a lot of like brilliant lawyers, in our midst. A lot of great, we're not Paradise, California. I'm not saying that they don't have brilliant lawyers also. I'm just saying like, let's use this to our advantage. The fact that we are in an affluent and very like, Altadena and Malibu Palisades can kind of like, join here for this effort because it's the same problem. And let's use that to our advantage. So if there are any folks that want to like, go this way, and I've seen chatter about this on the chats in terms of like bad faith claims, multiple like ways in which this can be parsed out legally. I'm not a lawyer, but I do think we need to join efforts on this. And this is the only thing that will move them is what I believe.
Yeah.
Well, Joy, do you want to tell us how to get in touch with you?
Sure.
Or what your thoughts are, because I do think that for people from the Palisades, first of all, I think the Discord server is a great idea. I don't know very much about Discord. I've worked with it a couple of times, but the big problem we had in the Palisades is that people who wanted to get into some of the WhatsApp groups couldn't because they shut down at 1,000 members. So having a server that can expand would be better. And then also there's the point you made, which is that you have a history of the dialogue, which is useful. As you say, people come on and they ask the same question that's been asked 500 times. And not only is it distracting, but it means people drop off in terms of participation because they don't want to be a part of a conversation that goes in circles. So I've already learned something. I mean, Ron and Oren, if you guys know anyone who can put a Discord server up pretty...
Oh, it's really, it's pretty easy.
What's that?
Yeah, get your kids.
Get your kids to do it.
I mean, I'm a 55-year-old woman. I never thought I'd be on Discord, but I've been, we've just been really, we're so grateful that we moved. The nice thing about also having the Discord is we have like these 1,800 survivors, and that's what you see when you come in. But we also provide this free back-end service for other grassroots groups, like our neighborhood council system. They have a walled garden of like several channels. And now we're moving on. There's a clergy coalition of 150 pastors in Altadena and Pasadena, and many African-American churches, non-African-American churches. And we're creating a private garden for them right now, like 5 different channels about prayers and whatever, all these other things. And so all those pastors, they have their area, but then they take advantage of the whole Discord. And so, all these disparate groups around Altadena, we can provide a technology platform. And they were originally like the 150 pastors. They were on reply all emails. Some other groups. There's a group of 500 elementary school parents that are on WhatsApp. They're having all those WhatsApp issues. So the nice thing about Discord is that everybody can be together and also share resources. And so we're providing these backend, basically providing a free scalable backend platform for these grassroots groups. So that's nice. And then as far as ours, but there's a lot of work that we need to do. I mean, we have a website, efsurvivors.net, and that is where the letter lives. And anyone who is interested in the State Farm campaign, just welcome to just sign. You just put in your name and your email address, and then you'll be on our email list, and we can start, at least giving people updates on this State Farm campaign.
Awesome.
I mean, I think that it may take, Ron, to your point, it may take a massive lawsuit to take down this practice. I mean, we're not asking for anything from State Farm other than what they owe us, right? I mean, it shouldn't be so difficult, right?
Right. That's why I say I'm not asking them to remodel my kitchen. I just want to get the smoke out of the house.
Well, you just want, and that's why they owe you. They owe bringing your house to a pre-loss condition. And so, but I mean, first, there's plenty of time to talk about lawsuits after 2 weeks from now. But in the next 2 weeks, we want Laura to provide proper oversight and to defer the rate hike.
Joy,
Just
before
we're
running out of time, I just wanted to ask you to double click on the Laura point. And I was asking Joel about this. I'm like no political expert, but there is an election coming up. I was just like bandying it about with Oren and Joel. Why don't we run a candidate from the community to be commissioner? I looked up like what the qualification of insurance.
Yeah.
I was looking up to see like what Laura's particular qualification was to be
none.
commissioner, and I really couldn't find it. I ran it through ChatGPT. I ran it through another model. I was expecting him to be some kind of insurance aficionado or some kind of like savant, and apparently like he has no qualifications at all. So I was like, we can do that. We can run with somebody with no probably you can run somebody with some qualifications. So like why don't we? Is that something like you're more? I love that. You were deputy mayor. Like, hey, why don't you run? Why don't we? We'll support you.
I'm not going to run for that, but thank you very much.
My suggestion was Snoop Dogg. I said we need a celebrity candidate.
There are bright people out there, and it would be amazing to run somebody. I mean, we could have somebody who has an insurance background, or we could just run somebody who cares about consumers, who really cares about California families. I mean, there's plenty of technical experts out there. We need somebody who's committed to the core mission of the DOI, which is to protect California families. I used to be, in addition to being deputy mayor, I used to be an executive search consultant. So I found CEOs and board members for Fortune 500 companies for a long time. And, we talk about what's on the resume. We talk about their skills, but then we also talk about their motivations. And I think for this particular role, we call that bucket C, when I trained other partners at Hijack and Struggles. So that bucket C to me of their motivations, their values, what's driving them, to me would be the most important thing that I would look for in the next DOI commissioner. To me, that would outweigh the insurance industry, deep technical knowledge. But I love the idea, Ron, of running somebody who really cares. That's what we need.
Somebody that lost his house, somebody that has the... had to go through the fight of insurance.
Exactly. You know what? In fact, that technical knowledge of having gone through the insurance project would probably be a stronger bucket A, which would be like what's on their resume, to me than the sort of like classic, you've been an insurance executive type thing.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
I know one or two people I might ask if they're interested, but
there you go.
We should
and
also
Democrat or Republican to me is it's irrelevant.
Doesn't matter.
I think the last guy who ran against Laura ran as an independent, so that's also an option. Especially in California, that can trip some wires. But I think that I literally was trying to find Laura's specific qualification. I just couldn't find them. So
no, there's not. I'm a Democrat. I've always been in the Democratic Party, and I feel like for us as Democrats, there's a responsibility to weed out the bad apples too. So, we need people of all Doesn't matter your partisan background. We need people who care and for the people and, who care about doing their job. And we especially need that in this DOI commissioner's role.
Just to close out, Joy, one of the things I've been trying to suggest, and I know it's happened on small scales, is some kind of social connection between Eaton fire survivors and Palisades fire survivors.
That'd be great.
And I had the opportunity to go out there a couple of times. I had been to Pasadena many times, visiting the Huntington Gardens and Caltech. I used to take my kids to Caltech to go bike riding because the campus is actually beautiful for little kids riding around on training wheels. It's pretty fun.
It's awesome.
But I went to Altadena for the first time, I'm sorry to say, after the fire, and the local rabbi in Pasadena showed me around because he had a lot of congregants there who would come to his synagogue, and he helped put out a fire in one of his congregants' backyard. But it's so interesting because the media have, I think, tried to juxtapose these two communities.
Rich versus poor.
Yeah, rich versus poor. I mean, as Oren was saying, look, on my street, we have a couple of celebrities. In fact, one of them I didn't even know lived on my street until the fire. But we also have people who bought their homes in the 50s and 60s for $50,000 and who are now retired and living in these homes that are on paper worth a lot, but they have no means whatsoever with which to rebuild. They probably are just like middle-class families everywhere. They lucked out. They bought it in an area that nobody was buying in for a while because maybe it's far from Beverly Hills and Hollywood. I have no idea, but it is a mix. It's a mix. And I learned that Altadena is also a mix, and that there's this incredibly important historic Black community, which is an important part of the story. And there are also other parts of the community. And I think there's an incredible social cohesion there that we also have. It would be amazing to share stories. And it was just amazing to me also that when I saw the articles about what you were doing, how much it resonated. And so I think you're doing an incredible job just to be a voice for everybody, because we have so much more in common than I think we even understood until now.
I love that, Joel. That's beautiful.
Thank you, Joy. And I think some of the stuff we can do is actually for folks in our community to join your Discord channels, because we have the same problems. Like all our channels, I'm sure, are identical.
You guys are welcome. If you go to our website at efsurvivors.net and then you click on the tab that says the Eaton Fire Survivors Network, you can click. There's a button, join the Discord, and you can have fun. I mean, impress your kids. You're on Discord.
Can we add a Palisades channel? Can we go on there and add?
Yeah, we can talk. I mean, come on in the Discord and add me as a friend, and then we can chat there. But I do want to say to you guys, I mean, starting this podcast, what a beautiful thing for your community, and provide a voice, a place to chat about these issues. I mean, it's great. I mean, none of us ever wanted to become fire survivors. I was happy enough, just being the admin of the pickleball WhatsApp at the Altadena Country Club. But, suddenly we've been put in this position where we have an opportunity to provide some culture, some leadership in our community, and help our community heal. You guys through your podcast, me through our Discord community, and it's a blessing to have an opportunity to help our communities heal. So I'm glad to share that with you guys. And I'm grateful for the chance to come to your podcast. I'm grateful for the chance to share and dream about a better future for your community and my community and our communities together.
Well, Joy Chen, thanks so much for being with us. The website is efsurvivors.net, efsurvivors.net. That's where you can find out more about what Joy's doing. And our website, of course, is 3homelessguys.com. And we'd love it if you subscribed, especially on YouTube. And if you can email us back any feedback or ideas, it's pod@3homelessguys.com. For Ron, Oren, Joy, and myself, Joel Pollack, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay strong.
Thanks for listening to 3 Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out 3homelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@3homelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.